That said, our primary purpose is to entertain, and where we can entertain responsibly, obviously we try to do that. We try to have a positive impact on the world. But the first thing we need to do is entertain.
There was an in-depth piece, like a behind-the-scenes piece, talking about how they've been in a full meltdown about this girl for a couple of years now.
AMC's decision to remove the live-action Snow White from all its theaters sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. Disney had counted on the timeless appeal of the original story, combined with the draw of a modern, star-studded remake to create a box office success. However, in a move that surprised both industry experts and loyal Disney fans, AMC announced that the film had performed so poorly that continuing to show it was no longer financially sustainable. Ticket sales had dropped so dramatically that keeping it in theaters wasn't just unprofitable, it was actually costing the company money.
I have a clip of it.
Oh, okay, great.
Her being a retard.
Okay.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White.
That laugh.
That is
not going to be saved by
You
the
wrote
prince.
it?
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows.
Empty seats in theaters told the story louder than any critic could. Screens that could have been reserved for more profitable titles sat deserted night after night. The decline had been slow but steady, yet few foresaw the complete collapse. That eventually followed. Not even Disney, with all its marketing might and vast resources, could rescue this live-action adaptation from the growing storm of controversy. From the now infamous live TV meltdown to the constant swirl of behind-the-scenes rumors and reported tension among cast members, every misstep only added fuel to a fan backlash that grew more intense, more unforgiving, and ultimately impossible to ignore.
It just takes a beloved movie and makes it much more boring and much less realistic. The movie is really, really bad.
Disney's promotional campaign pitched the film as a bold, visionary retelling of a timeless fairy tale, headlined by rising star Rachel Zegler and supported by the star power of Gal Gadot. But from the very beginning, the project seemed doomed. PR blunders, tone-deaf interviews, and a tidal wave of fan outrage turned what should have been a triumphant rollout into a slow-motion disaster. What was intended to be a celebration of modern storytelling quickly unraveled into a cautionary tale. The final blow came with AMC's stunning announcement to cut the film's theatrical run short, an almost unheard-of move for a Disney release. With the movie pulled from major screens before it had a chance to recover, industry insiders were left reeling, trying to understand how a film with such high expectations could collapse so completely.
Rights are on the line, folks.
Bitch! The
Our
right to buy
reproductive
Cosby
rights.
sweaters?
Come on.
This is the face
Go
of a
vote blue.
serial killer.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow.
Some argued that audiences were simply worn out by Disney's relentless push to modernize its beloved classics. Others pointed to the media storm surrounding Rachel Zegler. Her polarizing interviews and outspoken persona paired with a corporate PR campaign that felt more calculated than genuine. Whatever the exact cause, the outcome was undeniable. A box office collapse so severe that AMC had no choice but to pull the film from its schedule. The backlash grew louder than the film itself. What should have been a triumphant revival turned into a cautionary tale, one that studios are now dissecting with care. Even Joe Rogan dedicated an entire segment of his podcast to breaking down the disaster in meticulous detail.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Say it louder so your other eye can hear you.
So we didn't do that.
He emphasized that AMC's decision to pull Snow White wasn't just a reaction to poor box office numbers, it marked a cultural turning point, a breaking moment. For years, Disney's winning formula, brand trust, massive marketing campaigns, and A-list stars had seemed untouchable, but not this time. This time, the backlash overpowered the brand itself. Rogan analyzed the collapse like a forensic report. From Rachel Zegler's viral soundbites to the awkward moments during the press tour, the focus quickly shifted from the film to her. The takeaway was unmistakable. When a studio fails to steer the conversation ends up steering the studio.
The primary suffering is being sent in by my company to watch a children's movie as a single man, like 2 p.m. on a Thursday. That was the first part that was a little bit weird, but I was basically the only person in the theater.
It turned explosive. Rachel Zegler's unfiltered interviews, especially her off-the-cuff remarks on The View, along with a string of social media posts that clashed with Disney's carefully crafted messaging, only added fuel to the fire. What should have been routine press coverage quickly spiraled into a viral spectacle, unfolding in real time before a global audience. Rogan pointed out that even on its own, a PR meltdown like this would have been damaging. But paired with the film's drastic departures from the original, no dwarfs, no prince, none of the classic charm, the backlash wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Fans didn't just feel disappointed, they felt alienated. And in today's media landscape, that's a recipe for disaster when you're reviving a legacy franchise.
You don't particularly see people who, look like me or are me playing roles like that. So it was definitely, when it got announced,
He wasn't a stalker, by the way.
thing that was like trending on Twitter for days because all of the people were angry.
The fiasco began with what looked like genuine promise. Rachel Zegler was initially seen as a bold, exciting choice for the lead, bringing strong vocals, Gen Z appeal, and the potential to bridge Disney's legacy with its modern vision. She was meant to breathe new life into a classic. But as more details about the film surfaced, that early enthusiasm began to fade. Fans were stunned to learn that key story elements had been rewritten, beloved themes and iconic characters either drastically altered or removed entirely. The dwarfs? Gone. The prince? Absent. Even the iconic True Love's Kiss, a cornerstone of the original fairy tale's emotional heart, was missing. To many, it didn't feel like a fresh retelling. It felt like a total replacement. And not everyone was ready to let go of the magic that made Snow White endure for generations.
So it was like
Those people.
very much this, yes. It was this
People that we
awakening
need
of-
to educate, the people that we need to love into awareness.
love them in the right direction.
And so it became clear, those people? Yes, exactly them. In Rachel's own words, they were the people we need to educate, the people we need to love into awareness, guide them in the right direction. But the message didn't land the way she may have intended. The shift from a classic retelling to a bold reimagining had already sparked skepticism. Fans who once welcomed a nostalgic tribute now questioned whether Disney had gone too far, trading timeless heart for heavy-handed messaging, and gutting the emotional soul that made Snow White beloved for generations. Amid the growing tension, Rachel Zegler's public persona, once viewed as a major strength, became a lightning rod for backlash. Her comments about the original story struck many as dismissive, even condescending. Whether she was downplaying the prince, calling the classic weird, or suggesting the story needed fixing for modern audiences, her tone felt off. Online, that impression caught fire. What may have been framed as empowerment quickly morphed, at least in the public eye, into perceived arrogance.
We need to no, you don't. It's not your job. Your job is to entertain. You are paid to entertain.
Rachel Zegler's interviews came across to many as dismissive of the original Snow White, sparking frustration among longtime fans. Her comments were seen as disrespectful to the beloved classic, igniting a wave of backlash across social media. Rather than being celebrated as a bold new take on the character, she became the face of everything critics saw as wrong with the remake. In an attempt to regain control, Disney lined up talk show appearances to soften the blow. But by then, the damage had already been done. Public sentiment had shifted, and the backlash was irreversible.
Very few people wanted to see this. Even the little kids who like Disney movies, even they don't seem to be turning up in droves for the movie because the movie is really, really bad.
The goal was to salvage the film's reputation before its theatrical release, hoping to prevent negativity
So I've
from
got some
overshadowing its opening
bona fides
weekend.
here on being
However,
fair. The movie
Rachel
was
Zegler's independent stance clashed with Disney's efforts to manage her narrative. She continued to share her personal views on social media, often making it clear that she wouldn't compromise her values for a corporate agenda. While this could have been seen as admirable in another context, it became problematic given the sensitivity surrounding the project and fans' deep attachment to the original Snow White. Rachel Zegler's interviews came across to many as dismissive of the original Snow White, sparking frustration among longtime fans. Her comments were seen as disrespectful to the beloved classic, igniting a wave of backlash across social media. Rather than being celebrated as a bold new take on the character, she became the face of everything critics saw as wrong with the remake. In an attempt to regain control, Disney lined up talk show appearances to soften the blow. But by then, the damage had already been done. Public sentiment had shifted, and the backlash was irreversible.
This bizarre fixation with race shifting everything, but only in one direction by Disney, obviously is
The controversy only continued to escalate. Critics argued that Rachel Zegler's comments often came across as condescending toward those who cherished the original film. Meanwhile, her supporters maintained that she was simply promoting a modern perspective, advocating for representation and inclusivity. Ultimately, the clash between an outspoken star and a massive corporation took center stage, overshadowing any meaningful discussion about the film's artistic qualities.
Every way that the movie differed from the beloved 1937 original, it was worse.
As concerns about potential box office failure grew, industry insiders began to speculate that Disney executives were becoming increasingly anxious. Bob Iger, who had recently returned to his leadership position, was known for his skill in handling corporate controversies. However, as the days went on, it became clear that the studio's crisis management lacked cohesion. Instead of presenting a unified message, fans were confronted with contradictory statements from cast members and a growing swirl of rumors about behind-the-scenes drama.
It basically, this movie was like you took the original Snow White and just put everything through this filter of liberalism. It wasn't through a filter of Japanese anime, it was through a filter of liberalism.
The film felt as though the original Snow White had been filtered through a liberal lens, rather than being reimagined through something like Japanese anime or other creative interpretations. It seemed like no one fully understood the scale of the issue. The meltdown on The View only underscored the disarray. Disney's PR team had chosen the show as a safe, mainstream platform, aiming for a broad audience. The plan was for Rachel Zegler to address fan concerns, share her perspective, and emphasize that, while the adaptation was modern, it still respected the original story's spirit. But behind the scenes, tensions were escalating.
So from the casting to the class politics, the sexual politics, the regime politics, everything about it.
Production staff at The View were reportedly given clear instructions from Disney on preferred talking points, areas for Zegler to highlight, and topics to avoid. However, once the segment began, it quickly became clear that Rachel Zegler had her own agenda. She aimed to discuss political issues unrelated to the film and showed little interest in adhering to the carefully crafted lines the studio had prepared. The show's producers, under pressure from Disney, scrambled to steer her back on track.
Snow White is generally understood to be a very, very white person. And in this case, they decided, nope, no, that doesn't make any sense. So I don't think we're allowed to say that, right? I was referring to the movie as sand.
The friction was palpable during the live broadcast. Rachel Zegler made remarks that many critics later deemed incendiary, suggesting the original story's themes were outdated and urging nostalgic fans to embrace change. To those already skeptical of the adaptation, her comments felt like a direct slap in the face, sparking a wave of outrage that quickly spread across social media. Behind the scenes, the real chaos unfolded. Eyewitnesses reported frantic attempts by producers to cut Zegler off or steer the conversation elsewhere, but she remained defiant, doubling down on her statements. The segment spiraled so quickly that hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Sunny Hostin were left scrambling to fill airtime. Staff escorted Zegler off the set, and the broadcast cut to an abrupt commercial break. Though the meltdown didn't fully air, clips and secondhand accounts spread like wildfire online, fueling a media frenzy. Memes, jokes, and outrage dominated the internet, ensuring that every subsequent conversation about the film would inevitably circle back to that chaotic moment. On his podcast, Joe Rogan called it a PR disaster. Disney had lost control of the narrative in the most public way imaginable, during a live broadcast watched by millions. Despite immediate damage control efforts, the meltdown had already taken on a life of its own.
It's no really knock on her. If you did the autobiography of Malcolm X, would you cast Tom Hanks? If you remade Moana, would you cast a little Irish guy? No, you wouldn't. So that was off the...
The meltdown quickly became a focal point for those who saw the new Snow White as a betrayal of the original. Critics of Rachel Zegler argued that her outburst showed she was too strong-willed for the project, while her defenders maintained she had every right to voice her opinions. The controversy overshadowed the rest of the cast, including Gal Gadot. Expected to lend star power and credibility, Gadot was reduced to an afterthought as the narrative surrounding the meltdown took center stage. Rumors of tension between her and Zegler began circulating, further fueling perceptions of backstage conflict. Gadot, eager to protect her own brand, distanced herself from the drama. As a result, the film's promotional campaign, once focused on unity, devolved into speculation about cast disagreements, completely derailing Disney's original marketing strategy.
It is not racist to suggest that a character who is described in the original as skin white as snow, that is literally how the character is described in the original, that's a character description in the same way that, as you mentioned,
fan reaction to the new Snow White was overwhelmingly negative. Social media exploded with hashtags like #NotMySnowWhite, as fans felt betrayed by how much the adaptation deviated from the beloved classic. Many also resented Rachel Zegler's perceived dismissiveness toward traditional Disney elements. Despite Disney's heavy investment in advertising, the opening weekend box office numbers were underwhelming, with theaters like AMC screening the film to half-empty auditoriums. Parents, put off by the ongoing controversy, chose to take their children to other films. As ticket sales continued to plummet, AMC, recognizing the growing financial loss, made the decision to pull the film from its screens, redirecting theaters to more reliable choices. The film had become too toxic, overshadowed by scandal, and even a blockbuster budget couldn't salvage its reputation. In an unprecedented move, AMC, the largest theater chain in America, pulled Snow White from its screens entirely, signaling a dramatic shift in how the industry handles controversial films. This decision came after the film's poor box office performance, despite massive marketing efforts and the relentless negative media coverage surrounding its production. Fans, particularly those loyal to the original animated version, took to social media to express their outrage, creating a storm of negativity. The film, expected to draw large crowds, instead saw half-empty theaters nationwide. Industry insiders noted that Disney's relationship with exhibitors had been permanently altered by the Snow White debacle. Joe Rogan emphasized that Disney's failure to control the narrative in the public eye was a key factor in the film's downfall. He pointed out that Disney's usual formula, relying on brand recognition, star power, and massive marketing budgets, was no longer foolproof. The meltdown exposed the vulnerability of the studio-exhibitor relationship when a film fails to meet audience expectations. Typically, Disney would recoup losses through home video or international markets, but in the age of social media and 24/7 news coverage, Snow White became a spectacle, overshadowing any artistic merit it might have. The live meltdown on The View was the tipping point. Disney had hoped the daytime talk show would provide a controlled, friendly platform for Rachel Zegler to address fans' concerns and show that the adaptation, though modern, still respected the original story. However, Zegler's strong political views and unapologetic stance on social media, including her public criticisms of the original Snow White, didn't align with Disney's carefully crafted messaging. As Zegler resisted corporate control, the conflict escalated into a PR nightmare. On live TV, Zegler's dismissive tone toward the original story sparked anger among fans who felt alienated by the film's changes. What should have been a promotional appearance quickly became a viral spectacle. Disney's attempts to steer Zegler back on track only made matters worse. Eyewitnesses reported heightened tension behind the scenes, with producers scrambling to regain control as Zegler refused to be silenced. The segment spiraled out of control, with the hosts of The View left scrambling to fill airtime and Zegler escorted off the set. Though the meltdown wasn't fully aired, partial clips and secondhand reports quickly circulated online, feeding the media firestorm. Memes, jokes, and angry posts flooded social media, turning the film's promotion into a spectacle that overshadowed its intended release. The Snow White adaptation became a symbol of corporate overreach, with fans rejecting it as a misguided attempt to modernize a classic. Critics argued that Zegler's actions, combined with the film's drastic changes, showed Disney's failure to understand what made the original Snow White so beloved. AMC's decision to pull the film from theaters sent shockwaves through the industry, signaling that even Disney's most high-profile releases could falter in the face of controversy. Rogan called it a pivotal moment, demonstrating that a major studio-exhibitor partnership could crumble under the weight of a PR disaster. Disney's inability to regain control of the narrative and Zegler's refusal to conform to the studio's messaging marked a turning point in how studios would handle live promotions moving forward. Live unscripted appearances could no longer be seen as a risk-free way to generate buzz. They could expose vulnerabilities in a tightly controlled publicity campaign. As the fallout from Snow White continued, industry insiders speculated that Zegler's career would be scrutinized more closely, particularly regarding her outspoken political views. Disney would likely adopt stricter guidelines for future projects, ensuring that stars align more closely with the company's messaging. However, Rogen cautioned that if studios overcorrected, it could lead to even worse problems: stars appearing too robotic or disingenuous in interviews, which could alienate audiences in a different way. The Snow White debacle raised important questions about the current state of the film industry and its reliance on social media for publicity. Disney, once known for its seamless synergy between corporate offices, marketing teams, and stars, had failed to manage the film's public image. Instead of a unified narrative, fans were bombarded with conflicting messages and rumors about behind-the-scenes turmoil. What should have been a collaborative process turned into a public spectacle, damaging the reputation of everyone involved. Ultimately, Snow White became a case study in how quickly a highly anticipated film can spiral into a PR disaster. The View meltdown, combined with Disney's failure to control the narrative, ensured that the film would be remembered not for its artistic vision or potential to modernize a classic, but for the disaster that unraveled behind the scenes. Studios will likely take note of these lessons, realizing that when controversy overshadows creativity, even the most storied brands can fail.